Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to IDG Live. Today we're going to carry on with our series, short series probably, looking at the Stark children. We looked at Sansa and then Arya. Today we're going to look at Rickon. We've got obviously Bran and Robb to come, probably also Jon. But let's get straight into it. It's been a busy day for me. I've had a lot of things going on, good things, it has to be said. More about that later. But let's get straight into a question from Stephanie Lash. Hi there. Saying, Hi, Robert. No question. Just a thanks for years of great content. You do such a great job keeping these sessions fresh. Well, thank you very much. I hugely appreciate that. Um, yeah, today we're doing Rickon, which is I think it's I don't think I've ever done a whole live stream on Rickon. Um, and I think I'll start by saying that the issue with Rickon is the fact that we don't have much. And when I say we don't have much, it's because the only thing I'll say as a sort of introduction to this is that obviously on the show, he started off as a child. By the time he came back, he was a teenager. I don't know what age they thought he was, but in the books, at the start of the books, Rickon is 3. He's a baby. He's just a very, very young child. By the time we get up to the Winds of Winter, then he's going to be 6. Maybe he'll be 7. I don't know. So what we're not talking about here is a player on the kind of political level. We're not talking about somebody who is fully formed as a human and is like going out there and trying to make things happen. We're talking about somebody who could potentially be manipulated by others. We're talking about somebody who is a Stark. So yes, I don't want to take anything away from him. He is probably strong-willed, as far as we can see. He definitely is strong-willed. The word which many people often come up with is feral. He was brought up for most of his life now without parents. When we get to the story, let's not forget Ned goes south. And then shortly afterwards, Cat goes south. And Cat doesn't come back. Ned doesn't come back. And Rickon's not got any parents. Yes, there are people around there to be looking after him, but he was kind of bringing himself up. The only person who was staying there in his family was Bran, who was only a couple of years older than him. So what we're looking at here is a character who is a child. He's got no POV chapters, which I should probably say up front. George R. Martin has been quite open with the fact that he struggles with the idea of writing POV chapters for children. Now, he has done this for a number of children. Bran, Arya, Sansa, they're all very young when the story starts, but he finds it easier, understandably, to be writing POV chapters for adults. To be writing a POV chapter for a 3 or 4-year-old, I get that's a lot harder for him. So we never see things from Bran's perspective, which is the same randomly, I don't know, as Robb. We get all the other Stark kids, Bran, Arya, Sansa, Jon, they all get their own POVs. Rickon doesn't, and Robb doesn't. And George R. R. Martin has said he regrets not giving Robb POV chapter or 2, but Rickon, no. So that's where we're at. He's always going to be a little bit of a mystery. And what we know about him is that he has his direwolf, Shaggy Dog, who he is very connected to, probably from Clash of Kings onwards, maybe even a little bit earlier than that. They're inseparable. And Shaggy Dog also is, out of all of the direwolves, probably the least trained, is probably the way to say it. The one that people are most wary of, because Shaggy Dog will just do whatever the direwolf wants to do. So we have a child with a very dangerous direwolf, with a very strong bond between the two of them, who has gone off with Osha at the end of this story, as we know it, to somewhere. We think they have gone to Skagos. I've got a question about that in a moment. We think they've gone over to Skagos, but still, is there that kind of parenting influence? Osha is many good things. Is she a parent figure? I'm not so sure. Let's go to a question from Freddie J, saying, I have always thought his direwolf was called Shaggy Dog because he was never destined to grow up. So the direwolf's name is childlike language. Yeah, so, well, let's start with the direwolf name theory. And then we'll kind of, that's okay, we'll wheel back around to this. So all of the Starks got their direwolves, and they each named them as they wanted. Now, I did a video on this. If you're interested, go to the main channel and go and check it out. But the idea is among the fandom that the name that the direwolf has is the fate of that Stark. So, for example, Bran, his direwolf is Summer. Why? Because he is destined to be the king of summer. We have winter, spring, and then summer. Jon's direwolf, Ghost. Why? Well, he's going to die and then come back. Ghost. So, and then you can kind of work it through from there. So that's the working theory we have, which kind of works. Shaggy Dog, the idea that there's a Shaggy Dog story is obviously it's a long, rambling story that ultimately doesn't lead anywhere. And so people have taken that and they've taken what happened on the TV show and said, this means that his story is not leading anywhere. He's actually not a significant character because whatever his story is about, it's not going to go anywhere significant. So that's the kind of mainstream understanding of Rickon and Shaggy Dog. This question is about whether naming him in kind of childlike language is therefore going to affect his fate. If we go with that theory, I think the answer is no. What we kind of have to acknowledge, I think, is that the Stark children named their direwolves based on where they were at in that moment in time. So Sansa called hers Lady because at the time that's what she thought was impressive and important, to be a lady. Jon, I mean, he wasn't thinking about dying and coming back. Ghost is silent. Ghost never barks or howls or makes any noise, and so that's why he called it out. And also, Ghost is white, so that's why he called him Ghost. So the Stark children named their direwolves what they did based on their position then. The theory is that this was kind of foreshadowing, foreboding, something along those lines that indicates their fate. Now, I started out a firm believer in this. I have to say, I've slightly softened on this over the years, but I think the two things can be true at the same time. I think Rickon naming his direwolf as he does because he's a child can be true, and also that Shaggy Dog applies as a kind of a summary of how his life will end. that can also be true. Does the one counteract the other? I don't think so necessarily, but I understand the point, and maybe let's put it that way. SGH saying, if she survives long enough, as news of Rickon's survival spreads through the realm, might Stoneheart and the Brotherhood ally themselves to Stannis? Okay, so Lady Stoneheart has two motivations that we can see. There may be more. This is obviously Cat brought back to life, and what is left of her appears to be vengeance against those who wronged her family, and also trying to find her children. Now, she thinks that Bran and Rickon are dead, but she is desperately trying to find Sansa and Arya. So, might her finding out about Rickon mean that she allies herself to Stannis? I think for the next book, she is locked into the Riverlands, is the first thing. I think that she's going to be there getting her vengeance for a while. And only belatedly will she find out about the fates of her children. So even if Rickon comes straight back to Winterfell, and Bran comes straight back to Winterfell, even if Sansa reveals herself in the first couple of chapters and heads up to Winterfell, and if Arya comes straight back to Westeros, we're talking at the most the first half of the Winds of Winter. Lady Stoneheart is going to have at least half a book, probably a whole book, before she even gets a hint that her children are coming back to her. So, would Rickon being alive change her fate, make her ally herself to Stannis? Well, the first thing we have to say is Stannis still going to be around and a force when she learns about Rickon. So Rickon might arrive back in the northern storyline relatively early, because you don't really pick up on this when you're reading through, but there's a bit of a gap. Some storylines end quicker than others. In A Dance with the Dragons, A Feast for Crows, one of the ones that ends earlier is the Davos storyline. We last see him in White Harbor being sent off by Wyman Manderley, basically. And then Wyman Manderley makes his way all the way up to Winterfell, and we have a few chapters when he's there. So we don't know what happens to Davos after that. The implication is he must have travelled off. He must have gone all the way up to Skagos. By the time Wyman Manderley is there and Theon is making his escape, and the Manderley forces and the Freys head out, and we're about to get the Battle of Ice. Probably 3 months have passed for Davos. What could he have done in 3 months? He could certainly have got to Skagos in that time. Probably, if he found Rickon straight away, probably he could have come back a little bit of the way as well. So we don't know what will happen to him, but it's entirely possible that Rickon could arrive a lot sooner than you're thinking, because that storyline paused a lot earlier than the other storylines. So might Lady Stoneheart discover that Rickon is alive? She might, but probably not still until the second half of the next book. If she does that mean that she allies with Stannis? Well, I think that depends on what's going on with Stannis. Stannis, at the moment where we left him he and his forces are starving to death. In our minds, we're still thinking, a lot of us are thinking about the TV show. And he had this kind of pause before he went and attacked Winterfell. But in the books, it's really quite clear that the snow has come so deep and so thick, they're only 2 or 3 days away from Winterfell, but they cannot go any further because the snows are simply too deep. And so they're dug into this little village that they found. And every day, we get a couple of chapters to Stannis when he's there. Every day, people come to him and give him a list of all of his soldiers who've died overnight. This is, and the horses. This is horrific stuff. He's not gonna get there. So probably we're going to get Melisandre doing some kind of magic to push back the cold and the winter, allowing Stannis to push forward. But in the short term, he's not in a good position. And might he survive? It's possible, but I don't think it's looking likely that he will survive in a strong enough position to be the king in the north. And need people to be bending the knee. So what I mean by that is that maybe he wins this first battle. Maybe he pushes on after that and takes Winterfell, perhaps with the help of newly resurrected Jon and some wild things, and maybe even the Knights of the Vale. Maybe he takes Winterfell. Does he then have the power and authority to set himself up? Almost certainly, the North will look to a Stark to take Winterfell. And yeah, maybe they might bend their knee to Stannis as king overall, but not king in the North. So would Lady Stoneheart bend the knee to Stannis? Firstly, this is a long way away, at least until the second half of the next book. Secondly, is Stannis going to survive? I think probably. Thirdly, does she need to bend the knee? Probably not. She's going to be down in the Riverlands for almost all of the next book, almost certainly. Why would she need to bend the knee to some random southerner up north? And then I think finally, my overall take on Lady Stoneheart is that she was brought back to not there's not an intentionality in the bringing back so much as that what she's holding on to, which is those two things I said earlier, which is the revenge and the finding out about her children. So once those things happen, once she's got her revenge, which I think she will in the next book, once she discovers that her children are still alive, which I think she will in the next book, what's keeping her there? I talked a little bit about my new burgeoning proto-theory with Arya, that maybe Arya will be the one to give her the gift of mercy. If so, she's never going north, and she never even needs to worry about Stannis. So that was quite a long, rambling answer. I hope that one kind of makes sense. Let's go to a question from so Yeldenil's question was, I hope you and Dan are well. We are, thank you. Do you think that Rickon has any way to avoid his shaggy dog fate? And I don't necessarily mean avoid death, but avoid being meaningless. Now, there's a quote I want to use here from George R. R. Martin from back in the Game of Thrones days. which I think is quite instructive. So he says, the biggest thing was Dan and David called me up. Those are the showrunners. They called me up and had the idea of eliminating Rickon, the youngest of the Stark children, because he didn't do much in the first book. I said I had important plans for him, so they kept him. Now, first of all, we should probably take a moment to acknowledge that there was a time in season 1, at least, and I think it probably stretched on for 2 or 3 more seasons, that the showrunners of Game of Thrones did consult George R. R. Martin and bow to his knowledge about what was going to be going on. So they wanted not to have Rickon. And just from a pure showrunner perspective, forgetting the books for one moment, I kind of understand why they were considering this, because there's a lot of characters to introduce. And having Rickon there, if he doesn't really do much, it's another Stark for everyone to be remembering. I kind of understand why they might consider this, but George R. R. Martin slapped it down and he said, "No, I've got plans for Rickon." Now, that I think is quite important for 2 reasons. The first reason is that it tells us what he has already said, but I think we often gloss over, which is that, yes, he's a Gardner writer, but he does have a plan. He knows where this story is ending. He has an idea for what's going to happen to the main characters. Yes, as he's writing, it will branch out in different directions, but overall, there is an aim. It's not like he's just writing and just seeing what happens and keeping on writing. He does have an endpoint he's going towards. And in that endpoint, point 2, Rickon is important. So the idea or the question has to be, how is Rickon important? Because he is still a child, and he will be a child all the way through this. Now, George R. R. Martin, by this point, he had given up on this 5-year gap, 5-year time jump, which, if you don't know what I'm talking about there was early on, whilst writing A Song of Ice and Fire, George R. R. Martin had this idea that he would put in a time jump, a 5-year time jump, because the kids needed to grow up a bit, the dragons needed to get a bit bigger, and he positioned the main characters in places where they could just chill for 5 years or grow and learn. Jon, he could be at the Wall, he could be Lord Commander at the Wall. Sansa, she could be in the Eyrie. Arya, she could be training with the Faceless Men. Bran, he could be up there learning stuff from Bloodraven, etc., etc. You get the idea. All of the main characters, George R. R. Martin wrote to a position where they could pause and learn and grow. But eventually he decided, no, he wasn't going to do that 5-year time gap. The reason, if you've not come across it, I did do a video. I think I did a video on this, probably. But the main reason was he looked at Cersei, and he simply could not imagine Cersei just not doing anything for 5 years. Yeah, she might be there in King's Landing, but she would attack someone. She would do something crazy. Whatever it is, she would not be able to do nothing for 5 years in the way that Arya could feasibly be learning for 5 years. Jon could be a Lord Commander for 5 years. Cersei, no. So he abandoned that. He kind of worked his way around it. He made a couple of little tweaks. But what that does mean, obviously, is that Rickon is going to stay young. And when we're talking about important plans, I think we have to change this idea that Rickon is himself going to do a thing and move it to people are going to use Rickon to be doing a thing. I will come back to this theme a bit later, but my general thought is that the importance of Rickon is not going to be for the story. And it's not going to be Rickon per se. It's going to be the people who are pushing him. So the Mandalese have gone out on a limb to try and bring Rickon back so they have a Stark. Because they know that if there's a Stark in Winterfell, then the North will rally behind it. So that's the overall picture. Ryan's Orcas saying, hi, Robert. Hello. I have thought for many years that Rickon will play a significant role at Winterfell. I don't think Melisandre's magic will last for long after she burns Shireen. Davos will find Rickon and Shaggy Dog, be met by the Mandalese, and stop the second round of winter falling upon Winterfell. That would be significant for Rickon to be the first trueborn Stark to walk through the gates. All there would witness this event. Jon and Ghost would be there, and the Stark allies. So why would Rickon have to die? A plot, Robb's will, the wild nature of Rickon and Shaggy Dog, could that be seen as a threat? It can't be for nothing. What do you think? Okay, so there's a few things that are threads there that I could pick up on. Let's go with the winter thread. So I would 100% agree with you. Winter has fallen on Winterfell, and it is centered on Winterfell. Now, and when I say it's centered on Winterfell, if you kind of read all the chapters in those last couple of books, you'll find Winterfell itself gets the snowfall's very heavy. Like, really is just ridiculous. The outside the wall, the reason why Theon can jump with Jane Poole, fake Arya, can jump off the wall is because the snowdrift is so high. It's 40 feet high, which is, I don't know, 12, 13 meters, something like that. That's a big snowdrift in quite a small amount of time. We get again and again that the Theon chapters, incidentally, they're some of the best written, I think some of the best written chapters in the whole series. The Theon in Winterfell chapters. He wanders around and he can't even see his outstretched arm. He can't see his hand in front of him. The snow is really thick. When we get Barbary Dustin trying to find the crypts of Winterfell, she can't. Why is that? Because there's a massive snowdrift that's just like literally blocked off the entire. Nobody can even see the door. That's how much how deep the snowdrift is. It takes a couple of strong men half an hour just find the door. And then there's, and I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but there is a moment when Theon kind of looks out over Winterfell and thinks, I can't even see it. It doesn't. The snow is so deep, it doesn't look like Winterfell anymore. So that's the kind of context we have now. I did a series of videos. Actually, I turned it into a compilation. If you're interested, by the way, what I'm doing over with the compilations on the main channel, I sometimes do series of videos. Sometimes they're quite loose series, but they are series nonetheless. And then what I'm trying to do now, people have been saying, I want longer videos. So I've just taken those videos in a series and I've just pushed them together into one. I've like cut off the start and end of them and just kind of like squish them. Sometimes I've added a little bit of extra content in there just as a little bit of a bonus. But that's what the compilations are. And I did one compilation on Starks, the North, Winterfell crypts, etc. And in that, as a kind of a mark of my slightly changed thinking on this, in the video, the initial video about the Starks and Winter, I had said something along the lines of, and why must there always be a Stark in Winterfell? Because, if a Stark goes, then that breaks some kind of magic, and then winter will descend. I put in a little extra bit there for the compilation because I'd done a bit more thinking. I reread the books and come to the conclusion that it actually wasn't Bran and Rickon leaving that triggered winter happening. There was a period of time, months, maybe even a year, where winter did not fall on Winterfell, but there were no Starks there. What does seem to have triggered it was the Boltons taking control officially. Ramsay marrying fake Arya, the creation of a new house, House Bolton of Winterfell. That is the moment when the snow starts to fall heavily. So it's a technicality, but I think that the winter has fallen on Winterfell not when the Starks leave, but when there is a new house that is claiming ownership of Winterfell. I'm going on quite a few digressions here, but so when Rickon, to kind of around Zorka's bring it back to your question, when Rickon comes back in, the kind of the magical significance is not there's now a Stark back in Winterfell. It's when the Starks own Winterfell again. So at that point, we can expect the snow and heavy winter to be easing around Winterfell. It's still winter. The snow will still be falling there and everywhere else, but perhaps not to the same degree in Winterfell. You also asked about why Rickon would have to die. I think I will cover that in other people have got questions related to that, so I'll pick up on that. But what I will say is that just because he has come into Winterfell does not mean that he's free from dying. The person who is most likely to kill him did on the TV show, and I think is most likely to kill him also in the books, is Ramsay Bolton. So we will come on to him in just one moment. I think I had a couple of questions in the chat. Roman Lakovet saying, hello. In an early draft of A Dance with Dragons, Davos was the one to rescue Arya and take her to the wall. What would have happened to Rickon in this scenario? I mean, I don't know. I think it's worth pointing out how George R. R. Martin writes, and not just like tippity tappy on his old school computer, but he doesn't start at the beginning and then go to the end, and then that's it. He's finished, and then maybe he'll go through again and do an edit. That's not how he does it. He will start writing. He knows roughly where he's going. If his muse takes him off in a random direction, he will follow that muse. If that muse is good, that then becomes a part of the story. If it doesn't kind of work, then he takes those chapters, he puts them in a drawer, goes back and starts again. And he's admitted this in various different ways at various different moments in time. Mostly when we get to him talking about why, I mean, happy times, why he felt that he owed his readers an explanation for why A Dance with Dragons took so long. And the reason he gave, or at least part of the reason he gave, was what he called the Myronese knot. The fact that Dany was there in Marine and lots of people were going to come and see her, and he had to kind of iterate in which order they turn up, because the order in which they turn up changes the story. Does Victarion arrive first, or does Marwyn arrive first? What about Quentin Martell? When should he arrive? Should he arrive before Dany gets married? After Dany gets married? On her wedding day? All of those things will slightly tweak the story. So George R. R. Martin does not just write the whole thing and then maybe tweak it a bit. He will go off in different directions and then prune things until finally he has this one long um, line of chapters. So if you're kind of hang on, if you're saying what would in an early draft Davos did a different thing, I think the fact that that didn't make the final cut means that George R. R. Martin wasn't happy that that fitted with his wider story. If you're asking for the kind of the thought experiment, what might have happened? Davos rescues fake Arya and takes her to the wall. So what would have happened to Rickon? Perhaps this is the reason he didn't go down this route. Who is there to rescue Rickon? Who even knows Rickon is there? I mean, the only person who could possibly know, because Skagos is so remote, and this is probably why Osha took him there. Skagos is so remote, they don't really have any general contact with the mainland. The only person who might get to know is Bran. They do have weirwoods over there, it would appear. Roose Bolton, in a throwaway line, does say only the weirwoods know what they do there, which clearly implies that there are weirwoods over there. So I think this might be part of the reason why George R. R. Martin didn't go down that route. But what would have happened to him, certainly at least for a book, he would have stayed there. SGH, do we know that Stannis intends to install Rickon in Winterfell? How do we know he doesn't use him like a king's blood sacrifice to make winter fall? So, Stannis. Stannis is a great character because he's very clear on what he wants, but at the same time, he is willing to compromise, but he doesn't want anyone to know that. He has twice offered Jon the idea of releasing him from the Night's Watch and then making him the Lord of Winterfell, and Jon has said no. Which shows that Stannis is very clear in his mind that he doesn't want to rule Winterfell by direct rule from the crown. He thinks there should be a ruler of the North. And he is very aware that the only name that the North can rally around is Stark. So if he does, when he gets Winterfell, I think one of the first things that he will do is make a decision who is the Stark who's going to be ruling here, who's going to be the name of the named Lord of Winterfell that everyone in the North can rally behind. So no, I don't think he will sacrifice Rickon. I think the window for sacrificing King's Blood is actually quite soon. Stannis is not going anywhere. He can't get to Winterfell. His army is dying by the day. Melisandre at the wall, we've been told so many times that she's looking to sacrifice some sort of King's Blood. And Aemon has gone. He was related to a king and could have been king himself. And Mance Raider's son has gone. Jon did the baby swap. So Mance Raider's son has gone down with Gilly, down towards Old Town. And who does that leave? Well, Shireen is the answer. And we all know that Shireen is who George R. R. Martin is very likely to be killing in that manner. So, yeah, I think Melisandre, because she has got Shireen there, I think that is who the sacrifice is going to be. And I don't think that Stannis would, particularly if Rickon's not done anything to him, would sacrifice Rickon in order to save a winter that, or save himself from a winter that seems to have abated. Okay, let's go to Ranabe Mitra saying, salutations, Robert and Dan the dog. I hope you're excited about all the news reveals regarding the Hunt for Gollum cast and the confirmation of the Aegon the Conqueror movie. Well, let's pick up on both of those very quickly in case you've missed this. So, The Hunt for Gollum, which is the new big Lord of the Rings film from Peter Jackson et al. It's not the extent to which Peter Jackson himself is involved is still not 100% clear. This is going to be an Andy Serkis directed thing. But they're going to start filming, I think, next month, The Hunt for Gollum, and we've had a casting announcement, which is we already knew that Ian McKellen would be returning as Gandalf, Elijah Wood as Frodo, Andy Serkis obviously as Gollum, but we've got a few new names. We've got Kate Winslet, who is almost certainly going to be flashback in time to Gollum's or Smeagol's grandmother, who plays an important role in his upbringing. She's the one who casts him out of the village, so he then heads up under the Misty Mountains. We also have Jamie Dornan, who is going to be young-ish Aragorn, and Leo Woodall, who some of you may not know. He's been in White Lotus and a few other things. From what I've seen, he seems to be a good actor, and he seems to be playing a Dunedain ranger. So that's the casting news. And also Lee Pace is back as Thranduil. That's the casting news. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. The returning names, good. I like those people in their roles. That's good. The new actors, good. They've got good resumes. I like what they do. I mean, a part of me kind of harks back to the days that, and Game of Thrones and its spin-offs still does this, of like just picking unknowns, actors that I've never heard of before. And this is the thing that I'm slowly coming around to. People often ask, who do I really want to be playing this character or that character? I think more often than not, I'd be happy with a completely new person. I now trust the Game of Thrones team, or their casting director, whoever it is who does the stuff. They do well. Let's put it that way. I struggle to think of many actors within the wider Game of Thrones world who I've thought, nah, they didn't quite nail it. The casting people do a good job. So anyway, that's my only. It's not a gripe, but it's just like okay. Maybe there will be some unknown names later on. So that's the first bit of news. The second bit of news was, and you may have seen this today, the idea that we've got an Aegon's Conquest movie in the works. Now, I would sound a note of caution on this. It may well be true. It comes from, I think it's Sony did some kind of day for key industry people, and they did a coming soon kind of video thing, at the end of which it said Game of Thrones : Aegon's Invasion. Now, there's no more detail than that. What we already know, or already knew, was that there were two different Aegon's Invasion projects happening, one of which was a film, which is the thing we just heard about. The other one was a TV show. They've both got heavyweight writers involved with them. I don't think, this is the headline, I don't think we can take it on the basis of what we've just heard today. I don't think we can take it as read that there will not be a TV show. We've had no announcement from HBO about a TV show. The announcement from Sony about the film was not even an announcement. It was a few words tagged on the end of a presentation. No press release, no official word. There were no cameras allowed in that presentation, so we only have secondhand information about what even was said. Maybe this is them signaling that, yeah, we're definitely going to do this, in which case it then goes over to HBO to decide, are they also going to be pushing forward with this? So it's exciting, but I don't really think we've got enough yet to say that this is definitely a thing which is happening. Probably it is, but it's not an official announcement yet. Lady Pushkin's saying, or actually, hang on, did I get Ranabir Mitra? Did I? Oh, yeah, that was just the start of Ranabir's. I do apologize. I just, you mentioned the two exciting things, so then went on. So your question was, does Bran really know if Rickon, Shaggy Dog, and Osha are alive at the start of the Winds of Winter? Roose Bolton does make an offhand mention that only Hearttrees ever see half of what they do on Skagos, which makes me think that Skagos being half beyond the wall, per the map, does affect a Green Seer's vision on Skagos. What do you think? Or has he resigned to the idea that maybe his siblings are all dead? Okay, so first things first, yes, Roose Bolton knows that Bran and Rickon are still alive, as does Ramsay Bolton. I have a kind of half-written video, which I will put out at some point, with the working title something like, who knows that fake Arya isn't fake, or that fake Arya is fake? I probably come up with a video title, but that's the idea, because it's not as straightforward as we first think. When we first look at it, then this is fake Arya. Nobody knows this is fake Arya. They just kind of think, oh yeah, okay, maybe that is Arya. The Boltons know it's not. Does Bran know that Rickon is still alive? Well, Bran definitely knows that Rickon survived. And so all of the reports that may eventually come to him in whatever form, that he and Rickon were killed, he'll know that those aren't true, obviously. But then could he, through the Weirwood network or something, discover what's going on with Rickon? Yeah, I think he can. Jon already has, sort of. He doesn't really understand what's going on with his wolf dreams, but yeah, he kind of, via ghosts into Shaggy Dog, sees what's going on with Rickon. It's just a glimpse, but the Skagos vibes are there. The horny goat thing is going on. So, might Bran figure it out? Yeah, I think so. I think that's one of the first things he's going to work out, is what's going on with his siblings. We don't know huge amounts about how the Weirwood network actually works, but what we know is that what we can see, therefore what we think we know, is that Bloodraven, Leaf, gives Bran this kind of weirwood paste, which he takes, and after that he can see through the weirwood network. And we know that Bloodraven's there. He tries to say, okay, baby steps now. There's a weirwood tree literally just up there, up above us. Here's the root. Hold on to the root. Put yourself into it. Move up into it, and you can inhabit that weirwood tree. That's what what Bloodraven is trying to get Bran to do. It's just like baby steps. Like if you're learning to drive a car, you're not starting off going down at 70 miles an hour somewhere. You're starting out. Okay, so this is the brake. That's the accelerator. Da 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 da. You're doing the baby step stuff, and that's what Bloodraven was doing. But Bran doesn't go to the weirwood tree up above him. He immediately, he doesn't know what he's doing, he turns up in the weirwood tree at Winterfell, which I think tells us that you are instinctively drawn to places that you know or people that you know, because who does he see there? He sees his father back in time, and then goes back to other characters that have got some kind of link to him. Oh, there's his uncle and aunts. Oh, his old man. Going back, here's somebody called Bran. Going back through time, so there's something of a kind of a pull. He wasn't seeing completely random moments in Stark history. He was seeing things that he personally is connected to in some way. So, if we assume that that's the tug, the weirwood network is going to take you somewhere where your heart, yourself, you want to go, you want to understand, you want to see, experience someone in some way, then yeah, given the fact that we know that there are weirwood trees on Skagos, it makes absolute sense that Bran will discover what's going on with Rickon at some point. Rich Kenkro, do you think there's any chance Rickon could be the prologue or epilogue and die? Uh, Probably not. At least not the prologue. If you're talking about the Winds of Winter, uh, I did do a video on this if you want to check it out on the main channel, but the George R. R. Martin uses prologues in a very clear way. He has a POV from a character that doesn't have any main POV chapters, and the prologue sets up the themes for the book as a whole. Context. It kind of lays some things which are direct and some things which are kind of like slightly tangential, but they will play out through that book. What George R. R. Martin and so the epilogues, just by the by, he's only done a couple of them, but again, they're from a single person POV chapter, and the person dies. This is the thing that most people pick up on, is that the POV character dies either at the very end of that chapter or maybe a little bit after that, but they do not survive. So might we see Rickon here in the prologue or the epilogue? Well, George R. R. Martin has said that we will see Robb Stark's widow, Jane Westerling, in the prologue. Now, people jumped on that and were like, whoa, so she's going to die. And then he said two things in response to this. The first is that because we will see her, it doesn't mean that she is the POV character. There might be another POV character that we see her through their eyes. And then secondly, he says, oh, you know that rule that you're all very keen on, that the POV character in a prologue dies. Well, maybe I'll change that. Now everyone thinks that's the case. It becomes more impactful if I break it. So don't assume that the POV character in the Winds of Winter prologue will die. Probably, but not necessarily. So will we see Rickon in the prologue? No. If we're going to be in the Riverlands, which we have to be for that, then no, we're not going to see him as the prologue. Might we see him as an epilogue? Well, maybe. The idea of epilogues, George R. R. Martin uses epilogues to set up the next book, to be giving us the themes, the ideas, the bits of information we need that are kind of like they're teasing what's going to be happening in the next book. I'm not 100% certain that a Rickon chapter would be able to do that wherever he is, because he's 6. And George R. R. Martin doesn't like writing children. So I think it's a good idea, but I'm not sure that George R. R. Martin's going to go that way. Simon Schaffner. When I first got into the books, I thought Rickon POV was a lock for the Winds of Winter intro. Probably not, but man, it would be so cool. The young man is awesome. I feel like I've just answered that one, actually. Yeah, I hope you don't mind me. I talked for a little bit there about the prologue. I think for me, the prologue will be focused on the wagon train, prisoner train that's heading to the Westerlands with Jane Westerling and what's his name, Tully, and they will probably get caught along the way somehow. So yeah, I think that's basically what it is. And who's going to do the catching? Your guess is as good as mine. I did do a video, as I say, on that. Let's go to Lady Pushkin saying, I really want this to be not a Shaggy Dog story and that George R. R. Martin is playing with us and Rickon will be a significant part of the story. Yeah, I mean, George R. R. Martin has never confirmed the direwolf name theory. It has to be said. And it also has to be said that some of the direwolf names are a little bit more loose than the others. So I used the 2 clearest examples to start with. We think that Bran is going to be king at the end of this story, and he's going to be the king of summer, hence summer. Jon comes back like a ghost. So those are the ones, the direwolf names that make the most sense. Grey Wind is more kind of poetic, is that the Stark color is grey. This is a wind because he was rushing about and doing things, and yet winds don't last. Neither did Robb Stark. That's the working theory on what the Grey Wind name may be about. As I say, it's a lot looser. It kind of makes sense, but if there were another interpretation, I'd be happy to hear it. Lady, I think a lot of people, me included, thought that this meant that Sansa would end up as Lady of Winterfell. George R. R. Martin, in his Hollywood Reporter interview, which happened before Christmas, but it only came out in January sometime, he said very clearly that he had been planning to kill Sansa within the story, but he kind of liked where her story arc went on the show, and so he might now keep her alive, which means that the idea that her being the Lady of Winterfell, that is an idea that's been there from the very first book. Was George R. R. Martin wanting her to be a lady and then die? Or are we now just seeing a slight shift in what that means? Um, I'm just going back trying to find that question. uh, so, yeah, the question. This is from Lady Pushkin's whether Rickon is going to have a shaggy dog story that leads to nothing. I'm slightly less convicted on this, as I said, than I was before, because I'm slightly less convicted by the direwolf name theory than I was before. But I can't see much else unless you go for the real plain text reading of shaggy dog, meaning this is not a groomed pet. This is a wild animal. And that's what Rickon's fate is, to be a wild stock. Then I get it. That again, that's quite a loose interpretation of it. The stronger interpretation has to be the idea that this is a shaggy dog tale, and his story, as interesting as it is not significant. Let's go to Robb Badlam saying, "Greetings. What do you think of this?" Or as a possible ending for Rickon. His human body is killed mid-warg, trapping his mind inside Shaggy Dog. Then he joins the Battle of Winterfell as a direwolf, but then he has his conscious essence slowly dissolve into the wild wolf. Is this too much like what will surely be happening to Jon, or do you think George R. R. Martin would like to show what could have happened if Jon remained in Ghost too long? It'll be nice to see Rickon get a chance to contribute, have some heroic moments while still providing George with his bittersweet ending. Okay, so when if a skin changer, when they die, their human body physically dies, they can live on in their bonded animal. We have a few examples of this, but the biggest is Varamir Sixskins in the prologue to With Dragons. And in that, he dies, and then we're kind of like with his spirit. This is his POV chapter. With his spirit, he's now looking for somewhere to go, and he eventually goes and he finds his wolf in his kind of mini wolf pack. But through the chapter, he's kind of affirms that, after that moment, yes, you get your second life. Your physical human body is gone, but you have a second life inside your animal. He also confirms that you slowly, as a person, kind of give way to the animal. The animal slowly, and the animal instincts, you're in an animal's body, you have to do what an animal does. The animal instincts slowly take over, and then less and less and less of you is there. Is that what might happen to Rickon? It might, and yes, it would be sad. Would George R. R. Martin use it just as a way to show us what's going on with Jon? I don't think just that. And I also think that what happens with Jon will happen in the first half of the Winds of Winter. And what happens with Rickon may well also happen in the first part of the Winds of Winter. But it's not going to be immediate. I think Jon will come back for the reclaiming of Winterfell. And I think that Rickon will stay alive until at least then. So, yeah, I like this idea, but I don't see it as a. I don't think it's likely. It's possible, but I don't think it's likely. Catherine Fursith, do you think there's any chance that Rickon is not on Skagos? Plot-wise, it just seems just not that important, or did I miss something? Him hiding somewhere else in the north makes as much sense, if not more. Is there so? a so far hidden connection between the wildlings represented by Osha and Skagos that it will make it make sense to go there. So, yes, you've hit on a potentially really important point here, which is that we, as a fandom, have come to assume that Rickon is there. But there is nowhere that George R. Martin categorically says that's what's going on with Rickon. And we've had a couple of, I don't know whether to say we've been stung a couple of times. We had a couple of moments recently with the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms where we've had a leak or some information that has made the community go, oh, yeah, okay, I'm seeing that through slightly different eyes now. We've made an assumption about something that isn't necessarily true. And the prime example is when when the actors for Dunk and Egg were in I think they were in Ireland having a really easy Q&A session. Let's put it that way. This wasn't integrative questioning. And Dexter Sol Ansel, who plays Egg, just sort of like says, oh yeah, of course the story ends at tragedy at Summerhall, which we knew. But Dunk survives, which we didn't know. And it kind of came as a shock to many of us because we just kind of assumed that Dunk died there. And the reason we assumed that Dunk died there was because we know that lots of people died there. We know that Aegon died there, and we know that he is replaced as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard very soon afterwards, and he's not heard from again after that. So I think many of us kind of added up 2 and 2 and came to 4.5, which is nearly right. But it appears that George R. Martin has got other ideas. So we then have to kind of tweak what it is that we think. The reason why I went down that particular digression is because I think that Rickon being in Skagos is the same kind of idea, which is that we know that they were going in that direction, and we have hints via John's wolf dreams that that's where they are, but we don't have, because we don't have any Q&A, don't have any POV chapters from either Rickon's perspective or even Osha's perspective. We don't know that's where they ended up. So it's possible they're not there. On balance, I think it's likely they are. I don't see that there's much of a reason for George R. Martin to change his mind. Why might Osha have taken them there? Well, she's not as scared of the Skagosi as the normal Northerners. I think that much is clear. Perhaps I've heard some people suggest perhaps she's got family there as well. And the other question is, where on earth would they go that's not that? Bran was heading north, so the idea, and this is all Maester Lewin's, basically said, you've got to go different ways. So Bran went north, and then where does Rickon go? He can't really go south because that's heading towards the Civil War and danger. Can he go west? Well, that's through the woods, and I mean, it's possible, but there's not so much over there that would be a big secret. We've got, if you go through to the other side of the woods, you've got Deepwood Motte. Is that far enough away? No, because the Boltons will be going there very soon, almost certainly. Where will the Boltons not go? Skagos. So maybe that's the closest safe place that there is. Is there? I mean, I think you're also asking, is there some kind of connection? I think there's no specific connection that we know, other than where are the Boltons not going to send people? Skagos. Let's go to a question from Sir Friend saying, "Happy Thursday, Robert, and to you too. Why on earth did Rickon and Osha end up on Skagos?" A follow up to the last question. It seems to me like the island has been set up to have some pretty interesting, dark, and fantastical stuff going on, and George simply wanted an excuse to go there, which I'm all for and will love. But until I read otherwise, it doesn't really seem to make logical sense to me. Um, why did they go there? Well, um, I've sort of set out the why they went there. I hope that kind of makes sense. Uh, I do wonder, though, at the risk of disappointing you, whether we even get a chapter on Skagos. We may get one. The the idea, the George R. R. Martin's idea, is that he's going to bring all of his storylines back into one book, and because he split them up, he had two different books, and so things were going on slightly different timelines in those two books. So he wants to bring things back to the same timeline in one book. Um, that means that because the Davos storyline ended a lot earlier, we either have like quite an intense set of Davos chapters early on when he's hunting for Rickon and Osha, or, and this may, if I had to guess, this is probably where it's going to end up, or we suddenly get Rickon turning up somewhere near Winterfell, and we get a Davos chapter of him remembering how they got there, which sounds like a cop out, but George R. R. Martin has done this quite a lot. Well, how on earth did I get? I mean, Davos has a chapter at the start of Storm of Swords, after the Battle of the Backwater, where he's on this tiny little island out in Blackwater Bay, and he's trying to get rescued by a passing ship, but he's thinking back to everything that happened, and that's got us up to speed. So George R. R. Martin could do this. He's a good enough writer easily to be doing this, that you get a Davos chapter where they're just about to head towards Winterfell, and he's thinking of all the things that he had to go through in order to get them there. That kind of works for me. But will we actually have a chapter set on Skagos? Probably not. Is my idea. If we do, it's just one. Let's put it that way. Maura Lee, in past videos, there has been discussion of Robb's will. Do you think Robb's will ever be found? And will it play a significant role in whoever ends up as Warden of the North? Or will it just be dismissed, since Robb's brothers will be proven to be alive and legally can now claim to be Robb's heir? So, yeah, I did a video on Robb Stark's will, if you are interested in it. The main salient points, I think, are this isn't just a piece of paper. There were witnesses. There were 7 witnesses to this, and they could all be called upon to affirm legally what was in that will. So the actual piece of paper is not the important thing. What the important thing is where those witnesses are. So that's the first point. The second point, I think, is that the will wording, which we don't know exactly, is almost certainly predicated on this idea of, well, Bran and Rickon are both now dead, so here's my new heir. It's one for the lawyers whether Bran and Rickon coming back therefore invalidates that will. Probably, you might think. But this is not a country with a legal system that is clear and above board and everybody respects. Might is right is still the most important factor in any legal dispute. The person who is strongest gets what they want. So the Targaryens were the strongest family in Westeros. Therefore, they got to decide who gets different bits of land. You get that castle taken away from you because you didn't support me. You get that castle because you did support me. That kind of thing. So whoever's in power has the authority to make changes, which means that whoever's in power can interpret Robb Stark's will however they wish. And there are so many different ways you could interpret this will, just from a pure sort of legal perspective. I'm not a lawyer, but we can all be part-time lawyers. The one thing is that almost certainly it's predicated on the idea that Bran and Rickon are dead, which calls into question what if it turns out they're not dead. Then it's also predicated on the idea that Arya's dead, which she isn't, and it's also predicated on the idea that Sansa is married to Tyrion Lannister, which that wedding or that marriage is almost certainly going to be annulled. It wasn't consummated. Robb doesn't know any of this, but that's new information which perhaps might have changed what was going on in his will. He also wasn't to know that he wasn't going to survive more than the next few weeks because the Red Wedding was coming up. There's also the issue of, does he have a child on the way? I think the answer to that is no, but it is it's a question. So all of these things kind of play into the legal minefield about what that might actually say. But the bigger issue is, who are the powerful people who have decided who they're backing? Sansa will come up into the north. Littlefinger has set out his strategy. We've got no reason to dispute that or think it's not right. But he's going to go to the north with the Knights of the Vale, with Sansa there fully, openly saying that she's a Stark. And when they get up there, they are going to be one of the most significant fighting forces, because the North have been fighting each other for a while now and fighting down in the South. The Knights of the Vale have not. They're fresh. They're at full strength. So they will be a significant and important fighting force. And we've already talked about Rickon. He's got House Manderley supporting him. So we've now got two different people supporting two different candidates. Well, what about Jon? Because Robb's will, he legitimized Jon and named him his heir. So who's going to be supporting him? Well, probably Bloodraven will be from the shadows, but also the people who've been tasked with being the witnesses to this, they will very probably see that as their role to enact the wishes of their Lord King Robb. So very probably we're going to have a Jon faction as well, all of which kind of rolls itself up into this idea that Robb Stark's will is going to be important, not because it pitches Stark against Stark, but because it pitches Stark supporter against a different Stark supporter. We're going to get Littlefinger up against the Manderleys, which is something we've not had at all before. we're going to have, potentially the. I mean, I don't know who's going to be supporting John, but the wildlings there pitching up against the Knights of the Vale. This is not going to be an easy situation going on. So let's go to a question from Ethan Smith saying, "Hello, Robert. Hello. I have an off-topic question. I think I've got one or two. Yeah, I've got some more Rickon questions in a moment. But just as I'm pausing, if you're there in the chat, could you just show a bit of love to the moderators? This is going out not just on YouTube, but also out on Facebook and X. But at the moment, the largest amount of people are here on YouTube. If you are here on YouTube in the chat room, the reason why it's such a lovely place is because the moderators do a fantastic job. So moderators, thank you. And I hope you get a little bit of love there from the other people in the chat. Also, patrons, thank you. I cannot do what I do without your support, so I hugely appreciate it. That's probably my thanks. Now, let's get back to the questions, and I'm answering questions from my patrons. It's a little thank you for your support. And Ethan Smith says, what evidence is there, if any, that the Seven have any power in Westeros? We see the influence of the old gods through the Weirwood dreams and Bran's connection to the network. And Beric Dondarrion and Lady Catelyn are both brought back by R'hllor. But do we ever see anything that can be attributed to the faith of the Seven? I mean, this is a question which does come up quite a lot in different ways. Because the short answer to your question, which you already know, is that there's no hard and fast proof that the faith of the Seven is based in any kind of reality at all. Which isn't to say that there's nothing there. There's no magic there. That's a slightly different point. George R. R. Martin has been very clear that we are not going to see the gods in this story. This is a story about humans, and we're not going to have this isn't the Odyssey or whatever. We're not going to have the gods suddenly appearing and turning up and changing the fates of mortals or anything like that. That's not what's going on here. And George R. R. Martin likes his magic to be mysterious. So the idea of kind of fate and who, the efficacity, let's go with that one, of one type of magic over another, he doesn't want to go down that route. So what we're left with is just looking for, are there any incidents of septon, an adherent of the faith in some way, making a thing happen that shouldn't have happened? Well, it depends on how loosely you go with this. There are plenty of examples of people being healed through the faith of the Seven. One of those is very probably the Hound, who was left for dead. So we get that. So the Quiet Isle is a good example of the kind of thing where they're kind of are a prayer and service community, and rubies just wash up on their shore. Now, the counter argument was, well, rubies would wash up on that shore regardless of whether they were there, because there were rubies in that river upstream somewhere. But that's not the way they see it. I think the answer to your question is we don't have any evidence that this is true. George R. R. Martin is not going to tell us whether the religions are true. There are a few moments in the story where, if you wished to look for there to be a supernatural explanation for something that happens, that is available to you. but there are no moments in the story that I can think of where something happens that appears supernatural in some way that is unambiguously because of the faith of the Seven. So I think that's where we're out on it, is that we can't ascribe anything in particular to it, but we also can't say it's definitely that there's definitely nothing there. Andrew K saying Faith of the Seven seems more political or bureaucratic organization rather than magical, similar to how some medieval religions operated geopolitically. Mark Sheesa saying, wasn't Baelor the Blessed saving Aemon the Dragon Knight? That was a feat which might have been helped by the Seven? Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of those examples where if you're looking for evidence of a thing that you could say, well, this is the faith of the Seven doing this, then it's there, and that's certainly how it's reported. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the truth of the matter. And George R. Martin is not going to tell us the truth of the matter. Let's go to a question from James Perkins, a question about Rickon. Given that you yourself, me, have openly theorized that it may in fact have been Rickon, not Bran, who was the winged wolf bound in chains that Jojen and Meera were sent to retrieve from Winterfell, it stands to reason that Rickon is both a powerful and intuitive skin changer, despite his youth. He has now spent considerable time on Skagos, an island with deep ties to the wildlings and the First Men. To what extent do you think his powers have developed, and what might they be? We already know he can do dream visions, beating Bran to the crypts when they get premonition of Ned's death. Might Osha have found a more experienced skin changer to teach him, just as Bran has been learning from Brynden? Will the fact that he has not been perpetually on the move have freed him to grow more refined in his abilities? Or do you think he will have become more feral? I mean, it's a good set of questions. I think we have to start with the honest answer that we don't like to give, because it I think particularly kind of like online creators don't like to give the answer, because it makes it look like, oh, they don't really understand what's going on. But George R. R. Martin has not told us what's going on with Rickon, and so and also he has not given us enough outside information to know what's going on with Rickon. We've just got a few clues. We know where he was heading, and we've got and we know that Davos is going to that place, and we also have a snippet of a wolf dream that sort of John has via Ghost into Shaggy Dog, but that's about it. Off of the back of that we have decided as a community he's almost certainly gone to Skagos. But as we noted earlier, it's not 100%. Almost certainly, but it's not 100%. So into that information gap, we could write different things. A lot of people, I've certainly speculated on this a few times, a lot of people suggested that he's just going to go more feral. Skagos it's an island that it's not reported on in the most uplifting of ways. Now, we should take that with a pinch of salt, because that is from the Maesters south of the Wall. It's not what the Skagosi say. They may have a completely different, in fact, they probably do have a completely different story of who they are and what all of their culture and structures are about. So we might think that he's just going to be living in caves and becoming feral, and he might. But similarly, lots of things could have happened to him. He could have been caught by slavers. He could have gone to a village and become recognized for his skin changing. We simply don't know what happened there. So, and George R. Martin hasn't given us enough hints to kind of make it up. So I think that's where I would start with this. It's just, let's be honest, that this is one of those things that we've got a gap of months of knowledge here. We don't know what he's been up to. We know what happened with Bran. We don't know anything like that with Rickon. I mean, the question is, to what extent might his powers have developed? I think, to go back to the start of your question with this idea that he is a powerful skin changer and potentially who Jojen Reed was looking for. If you've not kind of come across this before, when we're talking about green dreams, Jojen gets them, Bloodraven gets them, Bran gets them. If you're talking about green dreams, when you appear in a green dream that other people can see, you do not appear as you. You appear kind of like an avatar in some way. And you do not have control over what your avatar looks like. And you cannot see what your avatar looks like, as far as we can tell. And your avatar is kind of like an expression of you in some way. Now, this is kind of theoretical, but when we get to it and Bran finally meets Bloodraven and he says, "Oh, you're the three-eyed crow," and Bloodraven, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but his response is something along the lines of, "Oh, so that's what I look like. Yeah, that kind of makes sense because like I'm a crow because I was a member of the Night's Watch, three-eyed because I've got the third eye open. Yeah, a three-eyed crow, that works." That was his response, which tallies with this idea that he did not know what he looked like. Why is this important? Because there's not a gamer tag above your avatar. So if you are seeing somebody else in this green dream, you do not know who they are. You just see their avatar, which they don't know what that looks like and is in some way an expression of them. So Jojen, with Mira, heads up to Winterfell looking for this winged wolf that is chained up. Now, he makes the obvious conclusion this is a Stark, wolves, etc. The winged wolf, flying, is used often as a metaphor for magic. And chained up, well, this is somebody who's theoretically magical but is being held down and held back. So, what does Jojen think? Well, he gets there, he sees Bran, he talks to Bran, he realizes that Bran is secretly magical. So he's a wolf, he's got the wings, he's tied down because he can't go anywhere because he has to be there. So that all kind of makes sense. But people have pointed out there was another Stark there. Rickon was there too. And he certainly seems to have some kind of magical abilities. The example that a few people have given is when Ned Stark died, their father died. And without going completely down that route, when a Stark king or Lord of Winterfell dies, their spirit seems to be like sucked into the Winterfell crypts. So we get this, it's a really interesting chapter. It's a Bran chapter when Ned dies. And it starts with Maester Luwin basically saying magic's not real. It probably was once, but it's not real. Then we get this moment when so they don't know that their father has died, and then they're going to go down. Bran feels this urge to go down to the crypts, and when he gets down there, Rickon is already there with Shaggy Dog, and he says he saw his father there. Bran has a vision or a dream of seeing his father there. So, and these are clearly kind of magical green seeing dreams. Maester Lewin's still not on board with this, but you get Summer doesn't want to go down into the crypts. Hodor doesn't want to go down into the crypts, and because they're both sensitive to something's going on. And George R. R. Martin has confirmed that Hodor being afraid to go down into the crypts, that was just a one-off. It's not that he generally doesn't like the crypts. He does. He's okay with the crypts. It was just that one day. And it wasn't just Bran who sensed something going on there. It was Rickon too. Which makes us think that Rickon clearly got some sort of a green dream. Hasn't been trained, but seemed to have got it anyway. And seems to have a very strong bond with his direwolf, which implies potentially big skin-changing powers. Might he actually have been the person that Jojen is looking for? Does it matter? Well, we don't know. But Bran is who was chosen, and Rickon was left behind. So, in terms of your question, might it have been Rickon? Maybe, but George R. R. Martin's going to leave that alone. Is there anyone to train him? Probably not. This doesn't make him unique. None of the Starks, other than Bran now, have had training in their skills. Arya, she's a skin changer and doesn't even realize it. Jon is, but he's got this idea that skin changes are wrong in some way. But he kind of understands that that's a part of who he is. He's just never really done it. So all the Starks haven't had the training, but here we have Rickon, who is very young, potentially very powerful, and hasn't done any of the training, which means that he's more of a loose cannon than the others. With you, Brian, saying, is there something intentional going on to cause this generation of Stark children to be especially magical, or have the Starks always been this way? Yeah, George R. R. Martin has been asked this a few times, and he kind of talks his way around it a bit. I have to be honest, but the answer he kind of frames it often in the fact they are first men, and we know that in the first men, the 1 in 1,000 of the first men, they get green dreams. 1 in 1,000 of those, or their skin changes, and 1 in 1,000 of those can be green seers. So the idea that there might be some Stark skin changes is not out of the question. The idea that they all are feels, yeah, there's something going on. And there definitely is something going on, because you think of the direwolf pups in chapter 1. Someone was wanting to make sure that they all had a direwolf to bond with, and that someone, I think, was Bloodraven, and I think that worked. So what was the question again? So is there something intentional going on? George R. R. Martin has never said yes, and he's kind of hinted that we shouldn't be that surprised. But at the same time, we have no indication that this is a Stark thing, as in Ned Stark never thinks my family have always been skin changers in any of his 15 chapters or whatever it is. And he never gets involved with the Starks and between his children and their direwolves. You know, the famous line, you know, you feed them, you train them, and you know, if needs must, then you kill them. Um, that's him saying, well, I'm not involved in this, which doesn't seem likely as we know, Ned, it doesn't seem likely if he thought that this was an inherited Stark thing that he has to tell his children about. So I don't think George R. R. Martin wants us to see this as odd, but it is still a bit odd. A question from Chaos Ballerina. In the show, Sansa turns Ramsay's dogs against him. Is it possible Rickon fills this role in the books? His direwolf is called Shaggy Dog, after all, and we know warged wolves can lead packs like Nymeria. So, possibly, I've kind of steered clear of talking about his ending so far. But we obviously know what happened on the TV show. And that did feel a bit like a Shaggy Dog story, because where did his story arc lead? Nowhere, really. One thing we do have in the books, though, is that Ramsay, he has these dogs, he has these hunting dogs, and it's very, and he said, we get this a couple of times, he trains them to hunt wolves. And Theon at one point even kind of thinks, I know what sort of wolves he means. The clear implication is that he has been training these dogs to be hunting down and attacking Starks. So if Rickon is going to arrive to everyone's surprise at Winterfell, then perhaps Ramsay will be out with his dogs and will give chase. So maybe we get a situation where we get Rickon returning and the triumphant Stark entrance, but Ramsay's dogs will finish off the job. The way you were interpreting it was obviously the other way around. That after Ramsay's gone, might it be Rickon who turns who turns the dogs on Ramsay? I mean, maybe. I can't see full evidence one way or the other, to be honest. But it's a nice idea, and I do kind of like it. But I also kind of like the idea that he will just get it cut down in a kind of a meaningless way. One thing I have to say this every now and then. I have to say this just to remind us: the characters that we know and love will not all survive this story. We have in our heads, I think, a clear idea about, well, that person's going to survive, that person's going to die because of what happened on the TV show. That's not where George R. R. Martin's head is at. He thinks a lot of people will die. A lot. And not just the characters we think a little bit morally questionable. Some of them will survive, and some of the good characters will die. So the kind of overall question is Rickon a good or a bad character, or is he just somebody who might get killed for the plot? I hate it, but he's probably the latter. Okay, let's do a question from Maura Lee saying, I believe it is Lord Manderley that wants to promote Rickon as Lord of Winterfell, but just like what happened in the TV show, I don't feel Rickon will have a very long life. What do you see as the future of Winterfell, and who do you see realistically eventually ruling as Warden of the North after all is said and done? Well, I think the first half of that I've just been covering. The second half, who at the end of the day is going to rule from Winterfell? I mean, I've long thought it was Sansa. I've long thought that's where her character arc takes her. Then George R. R. Martin said in that Hollywood Reporter interview that he had considered killing off Sansa, but now he's probably not going to. So that kind of left me with this realization that what my implicit assumption was that Sansa would survive and would be kind of ruling the North. That's not where George R. R. Martin's head was initially. Now, he might change that, but I think there's enough there to say that she may rule for a while. Whether she rules forever is less certain. A question from A.D. Ross. I'm curious what course you think Rickon's life might have taken had Robert Baratheon not called Ned to King's Landing. With two older brothers, under normal circumstances, Rickon wouldn't have had much chance of becoming Lord of Winterfell. And so I wonder what his future would have held. If he had been married into some northern family, would he have been integrated into the household of that family? Or might he become or been given a holdfast of his own? Or maybe join the Night's Watch? So what if none of this had happened, what would have happened to Rickon? I mean, it's one of these imponderables because this is something that even Ned Stark probably hadn't stopped to consider too much because Rickon was still so young. You're right that he's a third son, and that, in the grand scheme of things, means he's the one that you can allow to go somewhere else. A key factor in this is that Robb, because the age gap is significant, Robb, his older brother, would almost certainly have had children by the time that Rickon kind of reaches the age where he needs to make a decision needs to be made about him. And Robb having children was important because that pushed Rickon or would have pushed Rickon even further down the line of succession. So, as it stood, you had Robb. If Robb died, next in line was Bran. If Bran died, next in line was Rickon. So he was second in line to the throne, to Robb. If Robb had two children, then suddenly Rickon's down to fourth in line to the throne. So his importance as a Stark in Winterfell was significantly diminished, and would have been significantly diminished quite soon. So what would have happened to him? I mean, I think you're right about the general possibilities. I mean, you could also send him to the Citadel to become a maester, but he doesn't really seem the sort for that. To go up to the Wall, yeah, maybe. I think that's one option. I think probably he would have been married off to some family in the north to just reaffirm the Stark ties. So I don't know, but if I had to guess, that's probably what was going to go on. Okay, I think I've got 3 more questions. Then about A Song of Ice and Fire, but then not about Rickon. So if you've got any Rickon questions, now is a good time to drop them into the chat. The first couple of these are about Arya, who we talked about last week. So just picking up on things from there. AD Ross saying, I may be misremembering, but I seem to recall there being some hint in A Dance with Dragons that the kindly man has an inkling of how Arya was able to sense him when he approaches her whilst she's blind. This gave me the impression the Faceless Men may in fact have known Arya has skin-changing abilities. So I think a better form of the question I was trying to get at last week would be to would be, do the Faceless Men know about skin changing abilities, and do they suspect or know that Arya has them, and if so, when might they arrive at this knowledge? So yeah, I mean, it's a good question. As far as we know, at no point has a Faceless Man seen Arya skin changing. I mean, when she looked through the eyes of the cat, yeah, there was a Faceless Man there, but it wasn't her kind of freeing her eyes shut and willing something. It's just a thing that happened. So did they know when they recruited her, when Jaqen recruited her, did he know that she was a skin changer? I don't see how he could, is the short answer. Might the Faceless Men in Bravos know? Possibly. I mean, and when I say possibly, we get a kind of a throwaway comment that when she's asleep, she kind of growls like a wolf sometimes because she's having these wolf dreams, which may well have got them kind of thinking. They know her background. They know that she's a Stark, for example. So if even they will have known without any extra knowledge, the Starks, they're close with the wolves, right? So would they know that she's a skin changer? No. I mean, that one moment when she goes into the sees through the cat's eyes, she was asked direct, how did you know? And she says outright, I saw you. She doesn't say, because I was looking through the eyes of a cat. The context for this is that this whole bit is that she's been made blind. And they are trying to teach her, and they kind of picked up on this in the TV show, but not exactly the same extent. They're trying to teach her to rely on more of her senses than just sight, particularly if somebody's going to come and try and attack you. So that's what's going on there, basically. The second half of your question was, okay, actually, no, the second half of the question was somebody else's. That was Yaldanil. So maybe this sounds a bit far-fetched, says Yaldanil, but I was thinking, what would be the significance of Arya walking into cats while Sansa would potentially walk into birds? Would Arya be in danger of accidentally hurting or even killing her sister? Or do wargs recognize each other while walked? Also, the association with Varys's little birds and Sansa being called a little bird makes me think there's a possibility Varys could be involved somewhere. What do you think? Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, this is the first time I've heard somebody suggest this idea that Arya skin changes into cats, Sansa skin changes into birds, cats chase and eat birds. Is this going to be an issue? I don't think so. But it would definitely be something to keep an eye on. If yeah, if Arya does keep up with the cat thing, I think this is potentially an issue. But when I say keep up with the cat thing, is that she doesn't, even in the pre-release chapter you have from the Winds of Winter, she doesn't at any point think to herself, "Oh, remember that time when I skin changed into a cat?" It's like she's actually gaslighting herself in all of this. It has to be said, is that if you read that Mercy chapter, the pre-release chapter of the Winds of Winter, um, when she wakes up, she has this. She's sleeping. She has this wolf dream, and then she wakes up, and she's immediately calling herself Mercy, as if to tell herself her identity. And then what does Mercy do here? Oh, Mercy now does this. And it's like there's a voice in her head talking her through the day, which. Sorry, big sound thing going on there. So she does. I've kind of lost my train of thought here. But yeah, I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought completely there with knocking over my, my microphone. I think the headline here is that Arya does not think of herself as she's kind of, oh yeah, here we go. So she's kind of gaslighting herself into thinking that she doesn't have the Starkish stuff going on. She doesn't have the skin changing stuff going on. She needs to learn that in some way. Or if she doesn't, then she's just going to carry on just doing it instinctively and automatically. I do not think that she would be able to be skin changing into a cat that goes hunting for a bird at the moment. Let's put it that way. Last question from my patrons. Oh, actually, John Greenwood, just a quick question saying, "You're the best, Robert. Thank you very much. Rickon is my favourite Stark. I hope he makes it through the series. Would be too cool if he made a Wild Wolf's Blood Stark cadet branch." Yeah, so I think there's a non-zero chance. I kind of like we talked about the Shaggy Dog story thing earlier, but I think there is a non-zero chance that he survives. He's quite near the top of most people's lists, I think, of central characters who could die. But George R. R. Martin, he does like defying expectations. You kind of read, you hear it when he's like answering questions about when people are saying, "Oh, this is going to happen," or "Because you've always done that, that's going to be." He kind of gets this little wicked glint in his eye when he's sort of saying, "Yeah, Joe, now I've established this as what happens. Maybe I'll change it." So I think it would amuse him, the idea that perhaps this character who everyone assumes is a Shaggy Dog story actually turns out to get through it all, actually survives. So yeah, I think it's a non-zero chance. So last question from my patrons. Hranabe Mitra talking about the stage play, the A Song of Ice and Fire stage play, which is going by the name of Game of Thrones, The Mad King. Now, I've talked about this a lot because I'm very excited by this. I don't think it's putting it too strongly to say that this is going to be the biggest lore drop since Fire and Blood. And it may be even more in terms of the main A Song of Ice and Fire story. This is set around the tourney at Harrenhal, and so many things happen then. We're going to learn about Rhaegar and Lyanna meeting as a kind of a central point to all of this. We're going to learn about what's going on with Howland Reed? What was Rhaegar plotting? All of these things that we've kind of speculated on as a kind of a fan community for so long. Finally, we're going to get. I mean, George R. Martin might hold some secrets back. Yeah, we'll see. But we will get answers on so many of these questions. So I'm excited by this, and it's happening in July. So only a couple of months away now, and 3 months maybe. So it's happening in Stratford-upon-Avon, Royal Shakespeare Theatre in the centre of England, and it's got a run of from I think July the 20th to the end of October, or sorry, into the end of August. So it's a matter of just a few weeks. They are making big changes to the theatre. If you've ever been there, it is a big theatre, but they are making the stage even bigger. They're ripping some of the seating out, so it's going to be even more limited seating than normal. And the thing I'm most excited about is this morning I got my tickets, so I am going to go and see this. I'm very excited, and I will report back. Do not worry about that. So, in terms of your question, you're saying, does it make sense to view the show on opening night on August the 8th? I'm suspecting huge crowds, especially since the event starts a good 2 hours earlier on that day. Previews and other shows exist before August the 8th, so I wanted your opinion on whether it's worthwhile putting the effort for opening day. George R. Martin might be there, but I don't suspect he'll be speaking on the day. Would he? Question. Right, so I don't have any inside information on George R. Martin's movements. It makes sense that he's going to be there at some point, and it makes sense if he is going to be there, he's going to be there on opening night. But I don't know. I've got no inside information. So, as for dates, so July the 20th is the first public day. Now, I'm given to understand that there are a couple of private viewings before that, which is, I mean, this isn't anything too surprising. This is a chance for things to go wrong. Frankly, this is going to be a complicated production. This is taking place at a tourney. There's going to be high production values. There's going to be puppetry, not just like mini puppetry. I'm fully expecting huge puppetry horses and things along those lines. Lots of people on the stage at any given moment in time, lots of dialogue. If something's going to go wrong, it'll go wrong in those early times. So I think the main point is that if you want to go see this, now is the time to do it. I do not know where this is going on. The working assumption is it's going to go to London after this, and New York, and possibly Australia, because that's what George R. Martin has said at some point. But the stage production seems to be quite big and intensive, which will limit the amount of theatres that this can go to. I don't think it will be able to go to small provincial theatres. I think we're talking just going to big theatres. So, is it worth going to an early one? Yeah, I think so. I think also it depends on if you want things spoiled for you. I'm pretty sure no matter what happens, that within 24, 48 hours of the show, what's in there will be out on the internet. So yeah, if you don't want it spoiled, then yes, it's probably a good thing to get an early ticket. And I just generally, I'll say what I've said before: Stratford's a lovely place. It's worth a day trip if you've never been. It's a great theatre, but it's a beautiful little town, Shakespeare's birthplace. You can go look around, where he grew up as a child, the church that he used to go to. There's some fantastic, very old pubs, lovely little restaurants. River, you can go on little boats up and down. It's a lovely little place for a little day trip. So I would highly. I'm not here as part of the Stratford-upon-Avon Tourist Board, but I think it's a great place to go. So yeah, I would just encourage you, if you want to, go get tickets. Right, absolutely. Let's go for a quick flick through the chat. Secret Agent saying, just stopping in to say thanks to Robert for the excellent videos. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Reflective Rambling saying, not quite dress rehearsal, assume benefactors press, etc. Yes, so I mean the couple of private viewing days, I don't know exactly how they call it, but that's exactly what I'm thinking, is that it's that it will be a dress rehearsal, but also it will probably be a recorded version. They recorded everything that happens in the Royal Shakespeare Theatre. They do video record for posterity. So there will be a recorded version, and yes, there will be definitely press involved. They will get invites to come and watch it, and hey, maybe that's when George R. Martin will go there. I suspect that as part of the promotion for this, he will turn up, have pictures with the cast, etc. That kind of makes sense. Flick through. Reflective Rambling, yeah, whispering, I got tickets. It does, I know it won't make you less jealous, but yeah, I was very excited. Let's put it that way. Okay, so I think with that, let's just say what's happening next week. We will carry on with this series of videos looking at the Starks. I think, shall we do Bran next week? Either Bran or Robb. Let's do Bran. So we'll do Bran next week, then Robb, then maybe a Lord of the Rings one, then maybe we'll do John. How's about that for future planning? I don't normally think that far ahead with these live streams, but that's me trying to get ahead of these things. So next week, that's what's happening. Keep an eye on the main channel. Normal service on videos is going to be happening there. On this channel, I'm hoping to get some short form content up soon. I've been saying that for quite a while, but yeah, I certainly got a lot of stuff. I went to Salute, which is Europe's largest wargaming convention, the other day, and I got a lot of little bits of video. They had a fantastic little Battle of the Five Armies game going on, and a whole load of other good stuff. So I might get some shorts out of that. They will be on this channel. If you like the Well-Told Tale, then I've started back up on there again. Took a little bit of break from it, but we're going back. We're doing Frankenstein, which was actually, I think, the first, probably the second story I ever read on that, but the audio quality was not good. That was with an old microphone, so I've re-recorded it, and so that's now appearing weekly over on the Well-Told Tale. What else to say? Other good things. If you are watching this on Facebook, by the way, hello, great to see you. Also X, hello to you too, because this is being simul streamed over there as well. But we have reached the end of this live stream. So if you are watching up here somewhere, if you are watching on YouTube, a little bit later, that's where there's going to be a link to other live streams that I've done. Up here is a link to Patreon, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so, in which case, thank you. But that is all for this time. Take care, everyone, and I will see you again next week.